Today, before I talk about the first question, I just want to say one nice thing I learned today. That is, two friends this morning sent me a link to one of Swami Sarvapriyananda's recent videos. It's a video about free will. And one of the friends in particular asked me what my opinion on it is. So since I don't usually have time for watching videos, I decided to listen to it when I went for my walk. And while I was listening to it, one thing he said, which was, I don't know whether this is the correct etymology, but it's a useful etymology, even if it's not the original, the actual etymology, because it explains the meaning very nicely. That is the etymology of nama, as in namaskaram or namaste. He said nama means na-ma, not me. I thought that is a very nice explanation. Generally, nama is taken as salutation or obeisance or bowing down. But I always consider the real significance of nama to be surrender. For example, when we say Namo Ramanaya, we are expressing our willingness to surrender to Bhagavan. But this etymology, na-ma, not me, that expresses the meaning that I've always felt about nama very beautifully, because it is where this I is out of the picture, where we obliterate the I, what remains, that is the reality. So it is, nama is expressing that surrender. So I thought that was a very nice and interesting etymology. So I thought I would just mention that. And in this connection, I always like to say what Sadhu Om used to say about Namo Ramanaya. He used to say, Namo Ramanaya, Mano Maranaya. Namo Ramanaya means surrender to Bhagavan. Mano Maranaya means is for the death of the mind. So Namo Ramanaya is for the death of the mind. So when we, that ties in very nicely with this explanation of nama, meaning not me. That is, it is this I which is standing between us and this false I, ego, but is standing between us and Bhagavan. So nama means we're obliterating that I. So I thought that was a very beautiful explanation of nama. So I thought I would just share that. The first question I've received today, the first question of but I had received by email, but I'll be replying to today, is a question from Katie. Katie, would you like to ask the question, or would you like me to read it?
Hello, thank you, Michael. You can read it if you wish. It was a question in relation to karma.
Yes.
Because I recently had to do jury service, and found the whole thing quite disturbing. Well, everything about it was disturbing, really, because there was young people, quite young adults, who basically had done things that didn't seem right for 15, 16-year-olds, and they obviously had to go to prison, and they didn't seem to have a life long enough to accumulate such karma. And my question was around whose karma is it? Because I don't believe that the person reincarnates exactly as before. So my question was, can you actually do the karma of someone who lived 100 years ago?
Right. This is a very pertinent question. It's a very interesting question, because this highlights the distinction between ego and the person we take ourselves to be. That is, the doer of karma is ego. That is, whenever we rise as ego, we identify ourselves with a body. And as Bhagavan said, the body consists of 5 sheaths. So what he means by body is this bundle of 5 sheaths. That is the physical form of a body. the life, the mind, the intellect, and the will. These together are one bundle, and we experience this bundle as ourself. So because we experience this bundle as ourself, any actions by the mind, speech, or body, we experience them as actions done by me. So this is how the doership comes. So doership is synonymous with ego, because ego is this false, because ego identifies itself with the instruments of actions. It has that sense of doership. Whatever actions are done by these instruments are actions done by me. So the actual doer of karma is ego. The person because we take ourselves to be a person, it seems to us that this person is sentient. But according to Bhagavan, the person is insentient. All the five sheaves are insentient. What is sentient is only the ego that takes these five sheaves to be itself. So the one who does the actions is the one who has to experience their fruit. That is ego. The law of karma, as explained by Bhagavan, is that whatever actions we do by our will are what are called agamya. And agamya has fruit. So to put it in very simple terms, good actions bear good fruit, bad actions bear bad fruit, and neutral actions are neutral fruit. So whatever agamya we do in this lifetime, that is, whatever actions we do driven by our will, produce fruit. We cannot experience those fruit in this lifetime. Those fruit get stored in what is called sanchita. Sanchita means a heap or pile. So sanchita is the store of all the fruits of past karmas, that's karmas that we've done in past lives, but we haven't yet experienced. From that vast store of fruits of past karmas, God for each life selects certain fruit for us to experience. The fruit that we are to experience in this lifetime is called Prarabdha. And that is what in English we would usually call fate or destiny. According to Bhagavan, whatever we experience in this lifetime is what has been ordained according to Prarabdha. So we cannot experience anything that has not been ordained according to Prarabdha, and we cannot avoid experience anything that is ordained according to Prarabdha. So what we are to experience, that is absolutely predetermined. Why? Because God or Guru, it's the same. So we can say Bhagavan. Because Bhagavan is all-knowing, all-loving, and all-powerful, whatever he ordains is what he knows to be best for us, because he wouldn't let anything happen to us that wasn't for our ultimate good. Sure, Prarabdha brings so many sufferings. We undergo so many forms of suffering in life. But all these, whatever pleasures or pains we are to experience, they're all for our own ultimate benefit. That is, Bhagavan's aim is the eradication of ego. That is, because only when ego is eradicated can we experience the infinite happiness that is our own real nature, the infinite happiness that is what we actually are. So Bhagavan is not interested in giving us anything less than that. So all that we experience according to Prarabdha, what we call Prarabdha, we can also call God's will, because though it is the fruit of our past actions, it's the fruit of our past actions as selected by God for our benefit. So it is, as Bhagavan often said, whether you call it Prarabdha or you call it God's will, it's the same thing. So when we're on the path of surrender, we accept whatever, well, we are trying to accept whatever happens to us as the sweet will of our Lord. So whatever difficult, we all undergo various kinds of difficulties in life. whatever difficulties we undergo, they're given to us for our own benefit. And the reason why Bhagavan stressed that what is ordained according to Prarabdha, we cannot change in any way, is because our natural tendency, because when we rise as ego, we have likes and dislikes. We like the things that we think are going to make us happy, and we dislike the things that we think are going to make us unhappy. So we are always trying to achieve more of the things that we think will make us happy and to avoid the things that we think will make us unhappy. So we are constantly making effort by our will. The effort that we make by our will, the actions that we do driven by our will, are what are called agamya. But that agamya cannot in any way change what we are destined to experience. All we achieve by doing agamya is we're creating more fruit, but we are to experience in future. So obviously doing agamya is not a good idea, but the real problem is, so long as we are acting according to our will, we are feeding ego. We are perpetuating the rising of ego. So since ego is the root of all the problems, we want to eradicate ego. So if we want to surrender this ego, we have to start by surrendering its will. We have to surrender its likes, dislikes, desires, attachments, hopes, fears, and everything. If we are not even able to give up our desires, how can we give up the one who has those desires? So the desires are what draws our mind outwards. So long as our mind is going outwards, we are feeding ego. So our aim on following Bhagavan's path is the complete surrender of all our desires, along with their root, the ego. We cannot get rid of the desires entirely so long as ego survives. So this is why Bhagavan taught us the law of karma as he taught us. That is, but by emphasizing that Prarabdha cannot in any way be changed, if we understand that, we understand the futility of trying to change anything. We should just, things are going to happen as they're going to happen. We cannot change it. That doesn't mean we don't have freedom. We do have freedom of will. We have, that is, we're free to like or to dislike what happens. We also have freedom of action. We're also free within certain limits to do what we want to do and to not do what we don't want to do. So the actions we do in this lifetime are driven by two forces. On the one hand, certain acts, in order for us to experience what is destined to happen, there are certain actions we have to do. For example, if you're destined to become a doctor, to be a doctor, you have to study, you have to pass exams and everything. So those actions that are required in order for you to become a doctor, in order to experience the prarabdha of being a doctor, you will be made to do. That's what Bhagavan meant in the first sentence of the note he wrote for his mother. Avarava prarabdha pakaram adakanavan angangirintu atavipan. That literally means, according to the prarabdha of each one, he who is for that refers to God, he who is for that, being there, that means being in the heart of each one, will make them dance. Literally, it means make them dance. That means will be made to act, will be made to do whatever actions are necessary in order for us to experience whatever is destined to happen. But Prarabdha is not the only force that is driving our actions, because our will is also driving our actions. So but the actions that are driven by will are what are called agamya. So we cannot easily distinguish these two. Well, that's to what extent our actions are driven by our will, and to what extent they're driven by destiny. We can't, and we need not distinguish that. Many of the actions we do, for instance, to return to the same analogy, it may be our destiny to be a doctor. So we study and we pass the exams and everything. But most people who become doctors they want to become doctors. So their will is going according to their destiny. But certain people may want to be a doctor, but they're not able to get into medical school, so they end up becoming an engineer, for example. So by our wanting, we cannot change what is destined to happen. So if we're destined to be a doctor, we'll be a doctor. If we're destined to be an engineer, we'll be an engineer. And the actions that are necessary for either of those roles will be made to do. But usually people often end up in, many of the actions that we do according to Prarabdha are things that we want anyway. So many actions are driven both by our Prarabdha and by our will. There are some actions that we do which are totally according to Prarabdha. For example, supposing it's our destiny to be hit by a car while crossing the road, we will make a misjudgment. We may be very, very cautious in crossing the road, but that particular day, we will make a misjudgment and we will cross the road at the wrong time and we will be hit by the car. That action may be entirely according to Prarabdha. It could also be partly according to will, because I'm in a hurry to get to my thing. So our will may also be playing a role there. But in some cases, it may be entirely according to Prarabdha. Likewise, certain actions may not be in accordance with Prarabdha. They may be purely in accordance with our will. But if they're purely in accordance with our will, we can do them, but we cannot change what we're destined to experience. So, how do we avoid doing agamya? The only way to avoid doing agamya, since we cannot distinguish agamya from, we cannot distinguish to what extent any action is agamya and to what extent it's prarabdha, the way to avoid doing agamya, at least we can't totally avoid doing agamya so long as we have likes and dislikes, but to reduce the amount of agamya we do is to curb our likes and dislikes, our desires and attachments. Because to the extent that we reduce the intensity, the strength of our likes and dislikes and desires and attachment, to that extent, we will not be driven to act according to them. So that is why it is not necessary to distinguish agamya from prarabdha. The two are so closely interwoven, we cannot distinguish, and we need not distinguish. So, but our job is that if we're following Bhagavan's path, our job is to curb our desires, our likes and dislikes and so on. And the most effective way to curb them is to curb the root of them, which is ego. So by turning our attention within, we are curbing the rising of ego, and therefore thereby curbing its likes and dislikes. That's the most effective way to curb our likes and dislikes. We can also curb them by an attitude of surrender. If we have the attitude, whatever is happening by the will of God, it is for my good, so I happily accept whatever happens. Like Bhagavan prays in Nāṛ Ār Padigam, your wish is my wish, that itself is happiness for me. So we have, by that attitude of surrender, that's also a way of curbing the desires, but the most effective way is by curbing the rising of ego, because without ego there are no desires. In sleep we have no desires, no likes, no dislikes, no attachments, no fears, nothing. It's only when we rise as ego in waking dream but all these come into existence. I've explained this in a bit of detail, Katie, and I've not yet come exactly to your question, but I wanted to explain this background in order to be able to answer your question. In the case, we see in the world many young people who end up committing crimes. If we look at this from a purely external point of view, purely from a worldly point of view, some people are just born unfortunate. They're born in unfortunate circumstances. They may come from broken homes. There may be so many reasons why young people take to crime. They may be born in a certain under certain circumstances where their life seems to have very little opportunities, they maybe don't have the opportunities to have a good education, or even if the opportunity is there, they don't take the opportunities because there are other things that are distracting them. For one reason or another, life doesn't seem to have much opportunities for them, and so they take to crime. I mean, there's so many reasons, but this is all the external thing. Why we are each born in certain circumstances is according to Prarabdha. So that doesn't necessarily mean that people who are born in poor circumstances, they've done only bad karmas in the past. Sometimes even very good people have to face so much adversity from the beginning to the end of their life. That is because in the past, we have done so many different types of both good karmas and bad karmas. So the fruit of both good karmas and bad karmas are available there in our Sanchita. God selects, knowing what is best for us, for our further spiritual development in each life, he selects the fruit that will be most conducive to our spiritual development. So sometimes very good people face a lot of adversity. Sometimes very bad people seem to flourish. They're born in a rich family. They always have wealth, and by hook or by crook, they multiply their wealth. And so, just because someone is born in or faces is put in adverse circumstances, doesn't necessarily mean that they're a bad person. But what we are to experience, that is already destined. That's not the result of actions that we've done in this lifetime, but the result of actions we've done in previous lifetimes, as selected by Bhagavan. We come not only with the fruits of past actions, a certain set of which have been destined for us to experience in this lifetime, we also come with vasanas. And a person whose mind has predominantly good vasanas will not be led astray and into crime, even though the circumstances are very adverse. Whereas a person who comes with bad vasanas, well, even if their circumstances are very favorable, they'll still do inappropriate actions. That is often we talk of the wrongs done by the poorer sections of society as crime, but we overlook what the richer people are doing, which is often far, far more harmful, because the rich people find ways of skirting around the law, of twisting or using the law to their advantage. I mean, you see the business people who hoard huge amounts of wealth, and they find all sorts of loopholes to evade tax, and they manage to put their huge amounts of wealth away in tax havens. These people aren't called criminals because what they're doing is, strictly speaking, not according to the law. But still, they're actually plundering far more wealth than a poor person who happens to take to robbery or any other petty crime. So the human laws are imperfect. So, but what determines whether an action is a good or a bad action is the type of desire with which we do it. If our desires are selfish, those are bad actions. They may be not against the law, but they're still bad actions. If we are trying to hoard wealth by taking advantage of all sorts of tax loopholes, that portion of our wealth, which in justice should go towards social benefits by being taxed, by the benefit of society as a whole, we are keeping for ourselves. That it may not be illegal, but it's still immoral. So about the young people you're talking about, often when young people are in bad circumstances, those circumstances bring to the surface certain bad vasanas, and so they get involved in crime. Later, I saw something a few days ago. I think just yesterday or day before yesterday, one person was executed in America. Trump was apparently trying to rush through some executions before his presidency comes to an end, which shows what a heartless person he is. So this young person who was executed a day or two ago, when he was 18 years old, along with some other young people, he was involved in some sort of crime. I don't know the details of the crime, but apparently his friend shot 2 of those people. And after those people were shot, his friend told him to set fire to the car. So he set fire to the car. When the matter went to court, this is all more than 20 years ago, because when he was 40 now, well, he was executed 2 days ago, but he was 40. He set fire to that car. Later, there was evidence, expert evidence in the court. One expert said, no, those people were dead already. But there was some evidence that one of the people in the car, one of the dead bodies in the car, had soot in it. I think the lady had soot in her lungs. That means she was still breathing when the car was set alight. So he was sentenced to death. This is more than 20 years ago. Since then, while in prison, he has had an exemplary prison record. He was very, he was very repentant for what he did, and he tried to live a good life in prison and to help other people. And generally, everyone said he was altogether a reformed character. And so there were a lot of petitions, and people were even, I think 5 of the 9 surviving members of a jury and the prosecutor all said that he should be pardoned, or at least allowed to serve his life in prison and not be executed. But Trump wasn't concerned, and so Trump executed him. So why I mentioned that incident, there was someone who, according to circumstances, according to pressure from his friend, he was involved in bad actions. But he later came to see the wrong of his ways, and he tried to put his life back on a good track. Though he knew he was destined to live his life in prison until the time of his execution, if the execution was carried out, he tried to live a good life after that. So sometimes we all have a mixture of good vasanas and bad vasanas. Sometimes certain circumstances bring our bad vasanas to the surface. But then later we may understand what we did was wrong, and we may try to, the good vasanas may come to the surface, and we may try to live a better life. So there's so many, but the whole of the workings of karma are extremely complex and extremely subtle. We cannot understand these things fully. What we need to understand is the general principles that Bhagavan has taught us. That is, whatever actions we do according to our will, we do have, Bhagavan often emphasized, though everything is predetermined, yet we do have what he called Icha Kriya Swatantra. Icha Swatantra, Swatantra means freedom, Icha means will or liking, Kriya means action. So we have that freedom to will and to act within certain limits. So using that Icha Kriya Swatantra, whatever actions we do using our Icha Kriya Swatantra, our freedom to will and act, is a gamya. Those that are gamya, it may be good actions, it may be bad actions. According to the good actions will lead to, will give good fruit, and the bad action will give bad fruit. That's a general principle. So those fruit all gets, none of those, whatever we do in this lifetime, we cannot experience the fruit of those actions in this lifetime. It may seem, oh, this person has done a crime, therefore he had to stay in prison for 20 years of his life or something. So from a worldly perspective, it may seem that he's experiencing the fruits of his actions, but the committing of a crime and his state being that 20 years in prison, that's all according to Prarabdha. We cannot experience anything in this life which is not according to Prarabdha, and we cannot avoid anything that is according to Prarabdha. Bhagavan said in the note he wrote to his mother, what is never to happen will not happen, however much effort one makes, implying how much effort one makes to make it happen. What is to happen will not stop, however much obstruction one makes. Iduve tinnam. This is certain. He says very, very emphatically, this is certain. So we cannot change anything that is according to Prarabdha. But the fact that the crime was according to Prarabdha and the punishment was according to Prarabdha doesn't mean the criminal is innocent, because if the criminal, just like a person who studies to become a doctor according to his Prarabdha also wants to be a doctor, the criminal, though he's doing the action according to his Prarabdha, he also has desire for the fruits of that action. He's stealing money because he wants to use that for his own benefit. So just because all that we experience in this lifetime and all the actions we do that are necessary in order to experience that are according to Prarabdha, doesn't negate the fact that we're also acting according to our will. So the actions that we do driven by our will are agamya, which have fruit that get stored in sanchita, and will be a selection of those fruit are allotted to us for us to experience in each lifetime. They're selected by God or Guru. This is the general principle we need to understand. If we understand this, we will understand that whatever we do, we cannot change what is destined to happen. So rather than trying to do anything, rather than trying to increase the pleasant experience of life and avoid the unpleasant experiences, we should surrender the likes and dislikes that make us consider some experiences pleasant and some experiences unpleasant. It's actually, if we had no likes and dislikes, no experience would be unpleasant, and no experience would be particularly pleasant either, because if we have no likes and dislikes, we're indifferent to these things. However, so long as we raise as ego, to a greater or lesser extent, we do have likes and dislikes, desires and attachments. So in order to, the root of the problem is only ego. Ego is both the doer of action and the experiencer of those actions. So it's only by surrendering this ego that we can, and we can surrender ego completely only by investigating what we actually are. That is the only way to escape from all three karmas. Coming back to one other aspect of your question, Katie, as I say, what you said is, if someone is sentenced to prison with no obvious reason in this life to have accumulated such bad luck at a very young age, does that mean the young person's karma is from a previous life? If this person did not exist as they are now in a previous life, so is it the ego's karma? Yes, it's the ego's karmas. What I'm trying to work out, you go and say, what I'm trying to work out is, can a person serve out the karma of the whole ego's karma, but not have been the actual person who committed the crime in last life? The person doesn't commit a crime. It's ego that commits the crime. The person, as I say, the person means the five sheaves, the body, mind, intellect, body, life, mind, intellect, and will. These, according to Bhagavan, all these five sheaves are jada. That is, they have no awareness of their own. Our body isn't aware of anything. The life isn't, the prana, the life isn't aware of anything. But the mind here, in the context of these five sheaves, when he talked about the manomaya kosha, mind there means the grosser functions of the mind. They are not sentient. The intellect is not sentient. the intellect is the judging aspect, but even the will is not sentient. Our desires don't desire anything. It's we who desire. So the sentient element is only ego that takes all these 5 sheaths to be I. So ego is the doer of the action, and ego is also the experiencer of the fruits of action. The fruits that we experience in this lifetime are not actions done that we did as this person. They're actions that we did as another person. But though they were, we mistook ourselves to be another person, it was we who had those desires and did those actions at that time. That means we as ego. So all karma, that's agamya, is done by ego according to its will. The sanchita, the store of the fruits of those, and the prarabdha is experienced by ego. So it's all only ego. So we cannot remember what we were in previous births, but just because we cannot remember the actions we did in previous births doesn't mean that but we didn't do those actions. We did them, we just happened to have forgotten them. So whatever the law of karma is a perfectly just, it's the ethical, the moral law of cause and effect. We all accept the law of cause and effect in the physical world, but all karma is saying the same law of cause and effect applies also in the moral world. That is, if you do actions which are unethical, it will lead to bad fruits. If you do actions that are ethical, it will lead to good fruits. So the law of karma is a law of cause and effect on the level of ethics. I mean, it's according to whether our actions are right or wrong. That doesn't mean necessarily according to the morals of society, because morals of society are often wrong. There were societies in the past that considered, for example, slavery to be perfectly acceptable. Though it may have been socially acceptable, they may have considered there's no wrong in owning slaves and exploiting them. It's still a wrong action. Any action that we do that causes harm to others is unethical. So this law of karma is very subtle. We can't understand it. We can't understand the details exactly. We can't understand which actions cause which fruit and why. All these details we need not go into. What Bhagavan has taught us is the general principles. If we understand the general principles, that is sufficient. I mean, that's all we can understand. But why did Bhagavan teach us this? What is the benefit of this? Because if the natural tendency of our mind is to go outwards, to want to experience good things, the pleasant things, and to avoid experiencing the harmful things. So long as we believe that by our efforts we can achieve the things we want and avoid the things we don't want, we will continue making effort. Bhagavan says, whatever effort you make, you cannot change what is already destined. If we are firmly convinced on this, this will automatically make us more detached. Okay, I can't change anything that's going to happen, so why should I be perturbed about these things? So the more detached we are from whatever is destined to happen in our life, knowing that it's all the will of God and being willing to accept it just as it is without any desire to change it this way or that way, to the extent we are able to adopt that attitude, it will be easy for us to turn our attention inwards. Because we will know there's no benefit of going outwards trying to achieve this or to avoid that, because whatever is going to happen is going to happen. If we want to avoid experiencing these things, if we want to avoid experiencing the unpleasant things, the best thing is to turn our attention within. Because to the extent our attention is turned within, to that extent we're unaffected by the external things. So it's to help us in this path of self-investigation and self-surrender. But Bhagavan taught this law of karma, and why he was so emphatic. What is to happen will happen, whatever you do to try to stop it. What is not to happen will not happen, however much effort you make to make it happen. Does that adequately answer your question, Katie?
Yes, thank you very much. Yes, very complicated, but
it is complicated, but all we need to remember is that the general principles are quite simple. If we grasp the general principles, that's all we need. We can go on analyzing this thing, whether this action was destiny or whether it was free will. Well, it must have been destiny because it led to such and such a result, and that result was, according to Bhagavan, everything that we experience is destiny. So it must be destiny. That doesn't, it may be destiny, but that doesn't mean it wasn't also agamya, because if we did that action with desire, to the extent any action is done with desire or with done by according to our will, to that extent, it is agamya. It may also be prarabdha, but it's also agamya. So we don't need to, the details we don't need to understand. All we need to understand, if we understand the general principles, then we will understand there's whatever efforts we make to achieve anything are futile. Whatever we are to achieve, this body and mind will be made to do whatever actions are necessary to achieve them. So we can be completely leave the actions of the body of mind, we can leave it entirely in God's hands. Our only job is to curb the rising of ego and thereby curb its likes and dislikes, desires and attachments. In other words, we curb the will by curbing its root, ego. And how do we curb this ego? Simply by keeping a careful eye on it. To the extent that we are self-attentive, to that extent, we are not giving room to a rising of ego. So the more keenly self-attentive we are, the more ego subsides. And if we are sufficient, if we attend to ourselves keenly enough, ego will subside completely and dissolve forever back into its source. So it's actually very, very simple. If we grasp the core principles, which is all that Bhagavan's asking us to grasp, it's very simple. Very simple.
Right. Thank you very much, Michael. Thank you.
Maybe my explanation makes it sound complicated, but if we're trying to understand the external things, the external world is sure it's very complicated. But what is the cause for this appearance of this external world? According to Bhagavan, it is simply our rising as ego. So the core, the effect may seem very complicated. The cause is very simple. This rising of this false I that is aware of itself as I am Katie or I am Michael or whoever, that is the problem. Deal with that I and all problems are solved. Okay. So Bhagavan reduces he analyzes it down to the very root. And it's only, the only solution to all these problems is to tackle that root. Until we are willing to surrender ourselves, the problems will continue. Surrender is the only option. And we can achieve surrender only by turning our attention within to see what we actually are.
Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much.
Okay, several people have their hands raised. Krishnan, you have your hand raised. Would you like to ask a question?
Yeah. Namaste. Yeah, thank you for that breakdown of Nama. That's a new spin to.
Well, thanks to Swami Sarvapriyananda, because I learned it from him. It was just a nice thing that I heard today.
Yeah, so I'm quite a newbie on the scene. I've literally been studying Vedanta for the last 6 months.
Right.
Very passionately hooked on it, and obviously I've been learning about the sages of the past, and I've felt a very strong magnetic pull towards Ramana Maharshi, Bhagavan, and I actually watched the documentary Jnani, which I found fabulous, and I saw you for the first time on that, and David Godman as well. So I was watching a few videos there, and then that led me to learn about the foundation, and that led me here. So it's just amazing, the chain of events that I'm here now. So, but yeah, in terms of a guru,
yes,
obviously I know that a guru kind of can manifest in many ways via a book. Obviously, Bhagavan, he saw the mountain behind you as a guru, a living guru, and and even in physical form. In terms of, what did he say about, in terms of, do certain people actually need a physical guru? And if so, how do you discern the authenticity of that guru?
Okay.
Because I find that there's lots of gurus about at the moment. I feel quite confused. There's lots of people offering non-duality teaching, and like, how do you navigate this terrain? How do you find the right guide? So
and though non-duality is not true, you will find many, many different interpretations and explanations of non-duality. So it is confusing. About guru, what Bhagavan taught us a very deep and very refined understanding of what is guru. According to Bhagavan, guru is nothing but our own self. Our own real nature is what is guru. So, and that guru, our own real nature, is always teaching in silence. In order to study those silent teachings, we need to turn our attention within. That is, that which is shiny in our heart as I, that is the guru, that is the silence, that is the teaching. So that is what Bhagavan taught us about guru. And he also said, God and guru are not different. So that is, that which is shiny in our heart as I, that is both God and guru. So, so we need to turn our attention within to experience ourselves as we actually are. That is the truly following the guru and listening to the guru. However, because the nature of the mind is to go outwards, to attend to things other than itself, it is necessary for guru, in most cases, it is necessary for guru to appear in human form in order to tell us to turn within. So Bhagavan, that is the person we call Bhagavan, was our own real nature appearing outwardly in human form. He is not that human form. That is Bhagavan's fundamental teaching is, I am not this body. But so long as we take ourselves to be this body, Bhagavan seems to be that body seems to be Bhagavan. So through that body that we call Bhagavan, the guru, who is our own real nature, taught us turn within. That is, it was necessary for our own real nature to appear outwardly in the form of Bhagavan in order to give us these teachings. Because if he hadn't given us these teachings in words, our attention would continue going outwards. We are now trying to turn within only because he has pointed, that's the direction in which he's pointed us. In the case of Bhagavan, he didn't have any guru in human form. He himself said, he in one of the verses in Akṣaramaṇamālai, he says, Guru Vuru Vayale Aruṇācala, Aruṇācala who shine as the form of guru. So for Bhagavan, the guru, Aruṇācala was the guru. And what he taught us through words, Aruṇācala taught him through silence. In another verse in Akṣaramaṇamālai, I'll just tell you fully that verse in which he refers to Aruṇācala as guru. He says, Kutra mutrarutane gunamai panital guru vayale Aruṇācala. That means kutra mutra means all my defects, completely, defects complete. Kutra mutrarutane. So completely destroying my defects. Gunamai panital. That means making as one who had guna. Guna means good qualities in that context. Al means to take charge of. Take charge of me. That it's a very beautiful and very deep word in Tamil. It's used a lot in devotional literature. Al gives the sense of both. It gives a sense of ruling over, governing, controlling, but also the sense of taking responsibility for. So there's no adequate English word, but I think the closest we can come to explaining the meaning of al is take charge of. If you take, supposing there's you have a nephew or a niece, and the parents pass away. So you have to take charge of that child. When we say you took charge of him, but you are not only taking control of that child, you're also taking responsibility. You're caring for that child. That's what taking charge means. So that's the closest term I've ever found in English to explain this very, very deep and important word. But Bhagavan uses it a lot in various forms in Akṣaramāṇamālai and the other hymns of to Aruṇācala, and it's used a lot in all Tamil devotional literature. So Bhagavan is praying to Aruṇācala to take charge of him, to take all responsibility for him, and to take full control over him. And that is the role of Guru. So the role of Guru is to take possession of us, thereby destroying all our defects and giving us the good quality. What is the good quality? The only truly good quality is egolessness. So indirectly, that's what Bhagavan is praying for. So that is the role of Guru. So as far as the teaching, what Aruṇācala taught Bhagavan through silence, he expresses it in various verses, but in one verse he says very beautifully, he says, Tirumbiya handane dinamaha kankan teriyamanjane Aruṇācala. I think it's verse 44, if I remember correctly, of Akṣaramāṇamālai. He says, turning inwards, constantly see yourself with the inner eye. I there means ahakan, means the inner eye. Kan means I, like not the pronoun I, but the instrument of sight. So what he refers to as the ahakan, the inner eye, it's the eye of attention. So turning within, constantly see yourself with the inner eye. Terium, it will be known. Endranayan, so you said, Aruṇācala. Aruṇācala is a hill, so obviously Aruṇācala didn't say that in words. That is what Aruṇācala taught Bhagavan through silence, was to constantly turn within and be constantly seeing himself with his inner eye. So that verse, Bhagavan summarizes all his teachings. That is the ultimate aim of all his teachings. Is, I mean, for example, earlier I was talking about the karma theory. Why the law of karma? Why Bhagavan taught us the law of karma? Because if we understand that will reduce our incentive for going outwards and make it easier for us thereby to turn our mind within. So all Bhagavan's teachings are directed at turning our attention within. So if we go to a real guru, the real guru will not say, come to me, I will save you. The real guru will say, you are already saved, you're already that, go within, see yourself. So you say nowadays, Krishna, you say nowadays there are so many gurus. You will find many of these gurus, so-called gurus, would-be gurus, they're like business people. They say, come to me and give me so many dollars, and for my retreat, I charge so many dollars, and if you come to me, I will give you this. But what we learn from Bhagavan is the real guru will not say, come to me. The real guru will say, go to you, go within. So what Bhagavan taught us about guru is a very deep and sophisticated understanding. So the real guru will always, the function of the guru, the external guru, is only to turn our attention within. This is one way in which, Bhagavan explained this very clearly. Another difference between Bhagavan and almost all other gurus, in India, you will find so many sampradayas. That is, there's a guru, say Adi Shankara. After Adi Shankara, he set up 4 mutts, and there were 4 lineages. And even there's a 5th one, the Kamkoti Piton. So 5 lineages of Shankaracharyas. In almost every tradition, there is a lineage of gurus. When one guru dies, they have a successor. But because of Bhagavan's refined teaching of what is guru, he taught guru is that which is always shining in you as eye. There was never any need for any successor for Bhagavan. That is, The external form of a guru is necessary to turn our attention within. So Bhagavan is always present in the form of his teachings. And if we want a physical form, he's always present as Aruṇācala, because Bhagavan and Aruṇācala are one. So all the help that we could possibly ever need has already been provided by Bhagavan. All we have to do is to try our best to follow it. So this is why the true disciples of Bhagavan would never accept the role of guru. But, without doubt, the foremost disciple of Bhagavan was Murugan. But whenever anyone, after Bhagavan left the body, some people used to came to Murugan and said, "Swami, please be my guru." He would never tolerate such talk. He would say, "What are you talking about? Bhagavan alone is the guru. Bhagavan is the guru of all of us. No other guru is necessary. Once you've come to Bhagavan, no guru is necessary." So in the past, it was said, first you have to study the scriptures, and then you have to go searching for a guru who will give you the. Bhagavan has given everything that is necessary. So we don't have to go seeking for any guru, because everything that we do have to go seeking for a guru, but not outside. Bhagavan said, "Seek the guru within you. That which is shining in your heart as eye, that is guru." Once there was a devotee of Bhagavan called Janaki Mata. Once when she was visiting the ashram, she saw Bhagavan returning from the Gosala, and there were not many people about, so she thought this is a very good opportunity. So she went up to him and she prostrated before him and she held his feet. He looked down at her with a smile and said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I'm holding the feet of my guru." Bhagavan said, "These are not the feet of your guru. This body is perishable, so the feet are also perishable. If you take this form to be your guru, this guru is going to die." That's the true guru. The true feet of a guru are that which is always shining in your heart as eye. Cling to those feet. That alone will save you. So that is the real function of the external guru, to turn us within. Does that answer that question of yours adequately?
That's a great answer. Thank you very much. I think because I went to see a guy called John Butler. I don't know whether you've heard of him. He seemed to be someone quite anchored in silence, and he said that sometimes people need. He calls consciousness spirit, and he said sometimes people need form to connect to spirit. And yeah, you're right. I mean, I think relying on that, and he's not a teacher. He's just someone who just you can spend some time with. But I think with Ramana, it's like obviously just even like seeing his eyes, and I understand that he is just the form, but I don't know whether like Shakespeare was right by saying that the eyes are the windows to the soul. But there's something about Ramana that like that does light me up as well, knowing that his teachings as well. But obviously said, as you said about the form, I understand that you shouldn't be getting connected with.
Yeah. Bhagavan's eyes are very special, because if we look at Bhagavan's eyes, where are they pointing to? Where are they? Through his eyes, he's telling us to look within.
Yeah,
he's the true message of Bhagavan's eyes.
I'd agree.
And they are very, very powerful in turning our attention inwards.
Absolutely.
So we are fortunate, having come to Bhagavan, no other guru is necessary. The next question, Chris, is your question. Do you want to ask that?
No, you can just, you can.
Okay. Well, you asked whether the I thought, so-called, or sense of I, is within the realm of cidābhāsa, or reflected consciousness. What Bhagavan referred to as, in English it's often translated as I thought, but in Tamil the term is Nāṇ Ār, that is the thought called I. That is a term that he used to refer to ego, to emphasize that ego is nothing but a thought. Though ego is nothing but a thought, it is a thought unlike all other thoughts, because all other thoughts are jada. No other thought is aware of itself or of anything else. Whereas this I thought, the ego, is aware both of itself and of other things. So it is a thought, because according to Bhagavan, everything other than the pure awareness that we actually are is a thought. However, unlike all other thoughts, it is awareness. It is aware of itself and of other things. However, though it is a form of awareness or consciousness, it is not pure consciousness. Pure consciousness, the basic consciousness, the basic awareness is the awareness I am. That is the awareness of our own existence. That is what is called pure consciousness, because when we're aware of ourselves just as I am, we're not aware of anything else. So pure consciousness means consciousness which has no object. It's not aware of anything, it is just aware. So that is the nature of sākṣi, awareness of being, which is what we all experience as I am. However, though we always experience ourselves as I am, when we rise as ego, we are not aware of ourselves just as I am. We're aware of ourselves as I am Chris, or I am Michael, or I am whoever. So the Michael or Chris or whatever is the name given to a body or a person. So when we rise as ego, we're always aware of ourselves as I am this body or I am this person. And consequently, we're aware of other things. According to Bhagavan and Advaita generally, everything other than pure awareness is just an appearance. So being aware of all these appearances is not true awareness. It is a semblance of awareness. That is the meaning of cidābhāsa. Abhāsa, the primary meaning of abhāsa is a semblance, something that is like another thing, but is not that. So by extension, abhāsa also means a reflection. When you see your reflection in a mirror, it's like you in every way, but it's not you. It's a reflection. So cidābhāsa is sometimes translated as reflected consciousness and sometimes as seeming consciousness. So ego, this thought called I, is what is called cidābhāsa, because it is a form of awareness, but it's not the true awareness. The true awareness is only the pure awareness I am. Because as ego, we are always aware, firstly, of ourselves as I am this body, and of things that seem to be other than ourselves. This is what is called cidābhāsa. It is a semblance of awareness. It's not the real awareness is only the pure awareness, which is not aware of anything, because it alone exists. So long as we are aware of anything, of any phenomena, that awareness that is aware of phenomena is called cidābhāsa. So ego is itself cidābhāsa. There's no, if you listen to people who, to more traditional explanations of Advaita, people often explain cidābhāsa as if it was something other than ego. But Bhagavan made it clear that ego is itself what is called cidābhāsa. That is ego, though ego is aware, though it is a form of awareness, it is not the real awareness, because there is an element of real awareness in ego. That is, ego is always aware of itself as I am. That fundamental awareness I am, that is pure awareness. But ego is not aware of itself just as I am, it's aware of itself as I am this. So long as it's aware of itself as I am this, it's also aware of other things. So the defining characteristics of ego is that false awareness, or that seeming awareness, that is aware of itself as I am this body, and that is consequently aware of other things. So the ego and cidābhāsa are one and the same thing. Another term that Bhagavan used in Tamil, it's not, I've not found it recorded in none of the English books does it seem to have been adequately recorded. But fortunately for us, Murugan recorded that term in many places in Guruvachaka Kavai. That is, Bhagavan often referred to mind or ego as sutarivu or sutunavu. Suttu is a word that literally means pointing or showing. if you point something out, it means pointing out or showing. So, but what he referred to as sutarivu, the awareness that shows or points out, that is another term for ego. And he distinguished sutarivu from sutatra arivu. Sutatra arivu means awareness but is devoid of pointing, but is not showing anything. In other words, a pure awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself, that is the sutatra arivu, that is the real awareness. The sutarivu, the awareness of anything, is what he calls sutarivu, or it amounts to the same as cidābhāsa. Cidābhāsa means seeming awareness. Sutarivu means pointing awareness. That pointing in the sense that it's showing things, it's displaying phenomena. So the awareness that is aware of phenomena is called sutarivu or cidābhāsa. So this is one of the. This is a very important distinction to understand. Because people nowadays, they often say everything is awareness. Ultimately, the substance which appears as all this is only awareness, because awareness alone exists. But the pure awareness is not aware of all these phenomena. It's only when we rise as ego, as this reflected awareness, or this seeming awareness, this cidābhāsa, but we are consequently aware of ourself as a separate form and consequently other forms. As Bhagavan says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, if oneself is a form, the world and God will be likewise. If oneself is not a form, who can see this? Who can see their forms and how? Can what it is seen be otherwise in nature than can be of another nature than the eye that sees it? In other words, if the eye, as is the eye, so is the sight. When we limit ourselves as a form, we see only a multitude of limited forms. When we don't limit ourselves as a form, in other words, when we don't rise as ego, we aren't aware of anything other than ourselves. There's only the one infinite formless expanse of pure awareness. And Bhagavan says that is the real I. He concludes that verse. But the infinite I is the real I. I here means EYE. He's using he's using the term I, kan, that EYE, as a metaphor for awareness. So the real awareness is only the awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. That which is aware of thought, of forms, is only this thought called I, which is the first thought, I am this body. In other words, it's ego. Does that adequately answer that question, Chris?
Yeah, I think they use the comparison moonlight. In other words, the world is lit by the moon, but that is only reflected light.
Yes,
whereas sunlight is direct.
Yes, that is an analogy that is often used, but Bhagavan also sometimes uses that analogy. That is, when at nighttime the sun is seemingly concealed, but we're able to see objects by the reflected light of the moon. The light that is reflected from the moon doesn't originate from the moon. It originates only from the sun, but the moon is a reflecting medium. So the 5 sheaves of a reflecting medium, and in the reflected light of the moon, we can see objects in this world. When the sun rises, we can't stretch analogies too far, because obviously in the physical world, when the sun rises, we can see the objects of the world more clearly. But in the spiritual realm, when the sun of pure awareness rises, that is when ego is annihilated, all the forms are annihilated also. That's why Bhagavan says in, I think it's verse 27 of Akṣaramaṇamālai, Sakalamam Virungum Kadiroli Inamana Jala Jamalati Aruṇācala. He refers to Aruṇācala as the sun of bright rays that swallows everything, Sakalam. And likewise, he uses the same, he expresses it in a very similar way in the first verse of Aruṇācala Pañcaratnam. And he's praying to that sun to blossom the lotus of his mind. So the implication of that sun whose bright rays swallow everything, when the light of pure awareness rises, all phenomena will be swallowed. That is, along with ego, everything else will be swallowed. Because, as he says in verse 26 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, when ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. When ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. Ego itself is everything. So when people say everything is awareness, what is that awareness that appears as all this? It's only ego. So according to Bhagavan, in the light of pure awareness, that's the original light, the sun of pure awareness, no forms appear. It's only in the reflected light, in the moonlight of mind, that all forms appear. Because it's only when we rise as ego that we project the form of this body, and through the form of this body, we see all other forms. So form comes into existence. Though Bhagavan says in verse 25, about ego, grasping form it comes into existence, grasping form it stands, grasping feeding forms it flourishes abundantly. The forms don't exist independent of ego. And as soon as we, as Bhagavan says, this waking stage is just another dream. When we dream, as soon as we begin dreaming, we project a body which we experience as ourself, and through the five senses of that body, we project what seems to be an external world. But none of those forms, neither the form of the body that we take to be ourselves, nor any of the other forms that we see that constitute the world, exist independent of our perception of them. Only when we dream do all these forms seem to exist. Likewise, according to Bhagavan, all the forms of this universe seem to exist only when we rise as ego. And ego is not the original consciousness, it is the reflected consciousness, the seeming consciousness. It's just like the moon is a reflected consciousness, this ego or mind is, the awareness that we call ego or mind is only a reflection or a semblance of that original light of pure awareness. So he also says in verse 22 of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, I think. Yes. In verse 22 of Uḻḷadu Nāṛpadu, Bhagavan says, consider, except by turning the mind back within, completely immersing it in Pati. Pati means the Lord or God, who shines within that mind, giving light to the mind, how to fathom God by the mind. So God, or that means our own real nature, is God is just the pure awareness that we actually are. He's always shining within the mind, giving light to the mind. So the source of the mind's light, that is the source of the awareness that we call mind or ego, is only that original light of pure awareness. But when we rise as ego, the ego is not the original light, it's only a semblance of that original light, and it's only in that semblance of light, that semblance of awareness, that all these forms appear. Does that adequately answer that?
Very adequately, thank you.
Okay. Before I answer the questions from Jyoti and Shalini, who have their hands raised, there's only one other email, one other question I was asked by email. So I'll answer that first. This was asked by Maheshwar from Puerto Rico. Two questions he asked, which are closely related. Firstly, what makes Bhagavan Sri Ramana unique in the history of spirituality, and which are his original contributions that have been unknown before him? this is a very interesting question. It's it's not an easy question to answer because there are so many things about Bhagavan's life and his teachings that are unique. But I actually, this is on the 31st of January, which is Bhagavan's Jayanti this year, the ashram and other organizations are arranging a global satsang. And this is actually more or less the topic on which I've been asked to speak during that. And this is more or less the topic I'm going to speak on, but I will talk briefly about this today. One of the unique features of Bhagavan's teachings is what I mentioned earlier about what Bhagavan said about Guru. Bhagavan has given us a very refined understanding of what is Guru. The Guru is actually only our own real nature, and because our attention is going outwards, it's necessary for us it's necessary for our own real nature to appear externally in the form of in human form in order to tell us to turn within. So the function of the external form of the Guru is to turn us in, to connect with the internal Guru, who is always shining in our heart as eye. So the real Guru is that which is shining in our heart as eye. This is one of the many ways in which Bhagavan has refined old ideas. Bhagavan has represented in a very refined way. So and also one of the things we can see in Bhagavan's life was Bhagavan exemplified perfect humility. So he didn't attach any importance to his own name and form. So by telling us, though he is the name of form, that name and form is the name and form of Guru, he is telling us the real Guru is that which is shining in you as eye. In other words, he's diverting our attention away from his external form to his true form, to his Swarupa, which is what is shining in our heart as eye. Thereby he was able, that is, and he taught us by his example, but to the extent to which we erase ourselves, that is, to the extent to which we efface that separate existence, to that extent do we connect with the real Guru who is in our own heart. This is connected with what I said at the beginning about the nice meaning for Nama that I learned today, but what Swami Sarvapriyananda explained. But Nama means not me. That is, to the extent to which we are humble, to the extent to which we efface ourselves, to that extent are we not obstructing the work of Guru, which is ever going on, which is ever shining in our heart as eye. So to the extent to which we efface our ego, to that extent the Guru shines forth. So Bhagavan taught us that by example, by attaching no importance to his own form, by telling us, no, the Guru is not what is outside. This form is not the form of Guru. The real form of Guru is what is shining in you as eye. But this is just one small example of the way in which Bhagavan refined the ancient teachings and ancient beliefs and understandings. And in his presentation of his teachings are also very unique. Not that he hasn't Bhagavan never denied the ancient teachings of Vedanta, of Advaita, but he represented them in a way that is much simpler and much clearer, both to understand the theory of it, and by the way he explained the theory, itself revealed what the practice is. So I don't think the practice of those in some texts of Shankara and so many other texts, it is said vichara is the way. For example, in verse 11, I think, of Vivekachudamani, Shankara says, you cannot get this vastu-jnana by any mean, even by crores of karmas, but only by vichara. But what is vichara is most people who most of the old explanations of Advaita failed to clearly specify what vichara is. Bhagavan explained vichara very simply in one sentence in Nāṉ Ār, in the 16th paragraph. He says, sorry. He says, Sada kalamum manate atmavil veitirapadikutan atma-vicharam endrupaya. That means the name Atma-vichara refers only to the practice, well, the word practice isn't there, but it implies the practice of always keeping the mind fixed in oneself. So what that implies, keeping the mind fixed in oneself, means keeping our attention fixed on ourselves. In other words, being self-attentive, that alone is what is called Atma-vichara. So many people in the past, they took, if you study all the old texts, the Upanishads, Brahma Sutra, Bhagavad Gita, and the commentaries on them, and you discuss these things and think about these things, that is vichara. Bhagavan says, no, that is not vichara. You cannot, you can study any number of texts, but you won't find self-knowledge in the text. If you want to find self-knowledge, the texts are all out, as he says earlier in this paragraph, the texts are all outside the 5 sheaths. What we are seeking to know is within the 5 sheaths. So we cannot know what we actually are from texts or from any external source. In order to know what we actually are, we need to turn our attention within. So Bhagavan has clarified what the actual practice of Advaita is. That is, Advaita means non-two-ness. So the Advaita, the true practice of Advaita is not attending to anything other than ourself, attending to ourself alone. Only in self-attentiveness are there not two. Because the I that is attending and the I that is attended to and the attention are all one and the same thing. They're all just that fundamental awareness of our own existence, I am. So self-attentiveness, that is because what we are seeking is to know what we actually are. What we actually are is pure awareness. And pure awareness is awareness that is aware of nothing other than itself. So the practice, in order to achieve that awareness of nothing other than ourselves, the only practice can be this self-attentiveness, when we are trying to attend to ourselves so keenly, but we are aware of nothing other than ourselves, but we cease to be aware of all other things. So Bhagavan has clarified the practice in a very simple and clear way, but the same practice is taught in the ancient texts. For example, there are 2 verses in Bhagavad Gita, I think in chapter 6 of Bhagavad Gita, I think it's verses 25 and 26. And there are 2 of the verses that Bhagavan selected for Bhagavad Gita Saram. In Bhagavad Gita Saram, I think they're verses 27 and 28. And in that, Krishna very clearly describes this practice of Atma-vichara as taught by Bhagavan. But people fail to grasp that this is what is the real meaning of vichara, and this alone is the way. So Bhagavan made very, very clear what the practice is. Bhagavan also as I say, there are so many ways in which Bhagavan presented the old teaching of Advaita, but in a new, fresh and refined way. That is, the basic principle of Advaita is, in one of the Upanishads it said, but Brahman is ekam eva advityam. That means one only without a second. So what actually exists is only one thing without a second. So we cannot be other than that. Nothing can be other than that. So that alone is what actually is. That is our own real nature. As Bhagavan says in the 7th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, Yatātamai Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. What actually exists is only the real nature of oneself. So that is the only thing that actually exists. Everything else is a mere appearance. So, as I say, the basic principle of Advaita is that there's only one thing without a second. But this goes completely against our experience, because we are aware of so many things. We're aware of ourselves as this person, and we're aware of this world full of so many phenomena, and time and space and history and geography and neuroscience and physics and astrophysics and all these, so many things. If we allow our attention to go outwards, there's no end to phenomena. They're endless. The more we go out, the more we allow our attention to go outwards, the more phenomena there are. For everything we know, there's something more we don't know. So we can continue multiplying our knowledge of other things endlessly. Well, until this body ends, at least. But that is because all these things, as Bhagavan says, it's nothing but a dream. So the more you allow the mind to go outwards, the more it will project. But according to Advaita, all this multiplicity, how to explain all this multiplicity? If there's only one thing without a second, how to explain all this multiplicity? The basic teaching of Advaita is Vivartavada. That means, Vivarta means it's a illusion or false appearance, an illusory appearance. So all this multiplicity is an illusory appearance. It doesn't actually exist, it merely seems to exist. That's the basic principle of Advaita. But why, if there's only one thing without a second, why does all this multiplicity appear, is the next question asked. Advaita explains that the reason for this multiplicity is what is called māyā or avidyā. Māyā, Bhagavan explained, Māyā means she who, literally means ya, ma. Ya means she, or what is a feminine form of what. Ma means not. So she who is not, or what is not, that is Māyā. So Māyā doesn't actually exist. But according to Advaita, the explanation for why all this appears is what is called Māyā or avidyā. As in Advaita, there were many different levels of explanation. So some of the grosser explanations, they take Māyā and avidyā to be two different things. They say God creates the world by the power of Māyā, and we see it by the power of our avidyā. Bhagavan has simplified it all. He says Māyā and avidyā are all one and the same. But what is this avidyā? Avidyā means ignorance of our own real nature. So after Shankara, there were two schools of thought among his devotees. Everyone agreed, avidyā, the object, to use the technical term they used in Sanskrit, the vishaya of the ignorance, the object of the ignorance is oneself. That is, what we are ignorant of is oneself, is ourself. But what is it that is ignorant? What is the asraya, the abode of ignorance, was the question that was raised among the followers of Shankara after Shankara's lifetime. One group of his followers said the abode of ignorance cannot be jiva, because ignorance comes first. Ignorance is the cause of everything. So ignorance is the cause of the appearance of jiva. So the ashraya, the abode, or the what is ignorant, well, the ashraya of ignorance is Brahman. But that implies that Brahman is ignorant. How can Brahman be ignorant? So the other school of thought said, no, it can only be the jiva that is ignorant. So like this, there were so many different ways of explaining things and complicated ideas. Bhagavan bypassed this whole thing. Bhagavan said the root problem is ego. Ego means what is in the old text is called jiva. Jiva and ego are synonymous. So, but Bhagavan says, if ego comes into existence, everything comes into existence. If ego doesn't exist, everything doesn't exist. That means ego is the root cause of everything. Ego is the first cause, the cause of all cause, or all other causes. So how to explain how ego comes into existence? It cannot be explained. Why? Because how can you explain that which is the cause for all other things? There cannot be a cause for the original cause. So ego is the original cause. Another reason why we cannot explain how ego comes into existence, Bhagavan has said, because if ego investigates itself, we find there's no such thing at all. So how to explain that which doesn't exist? There's no way of explaining that which doesn't exist. So in so many ways, Bhagavan has refined it. But when Bhagavan said the root cause is ignorance, and the old texts say avidyā or māyā is the root cause, is there a conflict there? No. Why? Because Bhagavan says, what is ego? The very nature of ego is what is called avidyā. Avidyā means ignorance of ourself. Ego is the false awareness of ourself as I am this body. When we rise as ego, we are aware of ourselves as this body, as something other than what we actually are. So ego is itself avidyā. There's no avidyā other than ego. So Bhagavan hasn't contradicted the old text, but he's presented in a refined way, and he's thereby bypassed that problem. Because the old texts say avidyā came first. Then how can then avidyā must have come before jiva, is what some people inferred. So it must be, avidyā must be, its abode must be in Brahman. Whereas others said, no, that cannot be. That doesn't make sense, because Brahman cannot be ignorant. So it must be jiva. But then how does avidyā come before jiva? So it was all a confusion. Bhagavan simplified it. What is called avidyā is nothing but ego. Without ego, there is no avidyā. Likewise, Bhagavan said, māyā is nothing but this ego. So Bhagavan reduced everything back to this ego. By doing so, and by explaining the nature of ego, one of the unique features of Bhagavan teachings, which as far as I'm aware, has not been explained by anyone before, Bhagavan often emphasized this aspect, this nature of ego, in so many ways, when answering questions and things. But and in so many verses in Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, this is implied, but he expresses it most clearly in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu. What he says in verse 25 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, firstly, well, not firstly, in the last line, he describes ego as uruvatrapayahande. That means formless phantom ego. That means ego has no form of its own, so it's formless, and it has no substance of its own, so it's a phantom. As he explained in the previous verse, in verse 24, ego is neither the body, nor is it sat-chit. It is it's some spurious I that rises between the two and borrows the nature of both. It takes awareness from sat-chit. Sat-chit means the real awareness, the pure awareness, the awareness of our own existence, I am. So it borrows awareness from sat-chit, and it borrows the limitations of body. So it is aware of itself as I am this body. So ego is neither the body, nor is it sat-chit, but some spurious entity between the two. That doesn't mean that there's a body and there's sat-chit, and then between the two, we shouldn't take it literally. Because if we take it literally, that implies the body was there already and the sat-chit was there already. So what is there already is only sat-chit. When we rise as ego, we project a body and we take the properties of that body and the properties of Sat-Chit as I. So we borrow the awareness from Sat-Chit and we borrow all the limitations from the body. So because ego is not that body, it's just borrowing the limitations of body. Ego has no form of its own. That's why he says it's a formless phantom. And because it has no substance of its own, the awareness that the only substance of ego is this awareness. But this awareness is not its own awareness. It's awareness it borrows from Sat-Chit. That's why, as I said earlier, that's why it's called cidābhāsa. It's not the real awareness, it's a borrowed awareness. It's a reflection of the awareness or a semblance of the awareness. So the only substance in ego is that pure awareness I am. But that is not, that pure awareness I am doesn't belong to ego, it belongs only to Sat-Chit. So ego is a formless phantom. First he said that. So because ego is a formless phantom, we can never find any such thing as ego, because we look for it, we won't find it. So what he says in the first line of that verse is, grasping form, it comes into existence. Grasping form, it stands. That's the first line. In the second line, he says, grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes abundantly. Leaving form, it grasps form. That means leaving one form, it grasps another form. So the nature of ego is constantly grasping, and what it grasps are forms. But ego itself is a formless phantom. So how can it grasp forms? First, it projects the form of a body, which it takes to be I. And then because it's identified itself with this form of his body, it therefore sees all other forms. As he says in verse 4 of Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, only when self is a form, do the world and God seem to be likewise. So forms come into existence only after we project. The first form is this body, which we take to be I, and then all other forms come into existence. So what he calls grasping form means projecting and being aware of these forms. So ego comes into existence grasping form. The first form, as I say, is this form of this body, because if we didn't first grasp a form as I, we couldn't be aware of other forms. In dream, we never dream without being aware of ourselves as a person within our dream. So we first grasp that dream body as I, and then we, through the five senses of that dream body, we see the dream world. So, so ego comes into existence grasping form, it stands grasping form, grasping and feeding on form, it flourishes, leaving one form, it grasps another form. So this is the nature of ego. But he then says, Tedinal autem pidicum, if sought, it takes flight. What does this mean? All forms are things, because ego is a formless phantom, all forms are things other than ego. So ego cannot rise without grasping things other than itself. So the nature of ego is to rise, stand, and flourish by grasping things other than itself, by grasping forms. If instead of trying to grasp forms, it tries to grasp itself, it will subside and disappear. That is what he means by if sought, it takes flight. That is, we seem to be ego only so long as we are looking elsewhere. When we're looking at other things, we seem to be ego. When we're looking at objects, we seem to be the subject. The subject is nothing but ego. Subject means the perceiver. All phenomena, all objects are things perceived by us. So long as we attend to anything other than ourselves, we are feeding and nourishing the ego. When instead of trying to attend to anything other than ourselves, if we try to attend to ourselves, because ourself is just this formless phantom called ego, there's nothing to grasp. So as soon as we try to grasp ourselves, ego begins subsiding. So by turning our attention away from other things back towards ourselves, we bring about the subsidence of ego. So what Bhagavan has revealed in this verse is, this is an immeasurably precious secret that Bhagavan has revealed. The nature of ego is to rise and stand and flourish by attending to anything other than itself. But if it attends to itself, it will subside and disappear. It will take flight, as he says. That is, but the more we attend to ourselves, the more our attention is thereby withdrawn from other things. The more our attention is withdrawn from other things, the more this ego has nothing to hold on to, so it subsides. And when we turn our attention towards ourselves keenly enough, but we are aware of nothing other than ourselves, ego is thereby dissolved, and what remains is pure awareness, which is what we always actually are. So the source from which we have risen as ego is just that pure awareness, which is always shining in our heart as I am. It's never unavailable. So in so many ways like this, I mean, this is, I would say, possibly the most important thing Bhagavan has revealed is what is the nature of ego. But ego, the nature of ego is to attend to other things and thereby to feed itself. If it attends to itself, it thereby deprives itself of nourishment and it subsides and disappears. This is an immeasurably precious secret Bhagavan has revealed. So, for example, people who didn't understand, but I mean, Bhagavan also explained, though ego seems to be something other than pure awareness, because when we rise as ego, we are not aware only of ourselves, we're aware of other things. So ego is an impure awareness, we can say, or it's what is also called cidābhāsa, the semblance or the reflection of awareness, and what Bhagavan also called sutarivu, which means the pointing awareness. That's the awareness that's always being directed outwards, away from ourselves, displaying all these phenomena. So ego is not the original awareness, the pure awareness. So it's an impure form of awareness. It's a mixture of pure awareness and awareness of all these other things. So as awareness of other things, it's not pure awareness. Though it is not, though it is not pure awareness as such, it is not anything other than pure awareness. That is, we don't have two selves, we don't have two eyes, there is only one eye. When that one eye remains just as I am, that is pure awareness. When that one eye seems to take on adjuncts and to be aware of itself as I am this or I am that, that is ego. So ego in substance is nothing other than pure awareness. So the difference between ego and pure awareness is only a difference in appearance. And we appear to be ego, we seem to be ego, only when we attend to other things. When we try to attend to ourselves, ego is not an object. It's not, we can never see ourselves as an object. So when we try to attend to ourselves, there's nothing for us to hold on, for us as ego to hold on to. So when ego tries to grasp itself, it automatically subsides because it can never see itself as an object. And the more it attends to itself, the closer it comes to experiencing itself as pure awareness. And when it attends to itself so keenly that it thereby withdraws its attention from all other things, then it's only aware of itself. That which is aware only of itself is pure awareness, no longer ego. So ego is automatically dissolved and destroyed by this self-attentiveness. So Bhagavan has made this so clear. In this way, Bhagavan has, most importantly, he made the practice crystal clear. What is the practice that we require? And even self-surrender, though he said there are two ways, either investigate yourself or surrender yourself, he also made it clear, but for surrender to become complete, we need to investigate ourselves. Because so long as we allow our attention towards anything else, we are sustaining ego. In order to surrender ego, we as ego need to turn our attention back to ourselves. So, I know what I was going to say. Often people who didn't fully understand Bhagavan's teachings, people often ask Bhagavan, when I do this Atma-vichara, this self-enquiry that you talk about, what is the I that I'm to inquire? Is it that I'm to investigate? Is it ego or is it the real self, the Atma-swarupa? Bhagavan said, ego. Why did he say ego? Because so long as you think that there are two eyes, an ego and an Atma-swarupa. Bhagavan said, just, it's sufficient you just look at ego. That's all. You don't worry about that Atma-swarupa or your real self or anything. Just attend to this ego. Why? Because if we attend to ego keenly enough, we will see it's nothing but Atma-swarupa. Supposing we're walking along a path in the dark with Bhagavan, and we see a rope lying on the path, but we mistake it to be a snake and we're afraid. Bhagavan tells us, no, it's not a snake, it's only a rope. But still, to us, it looks suspiciously like a snake. So we're a little bit afraid. But if we believe Bhagavan's words, and Bhagavan said, Bhagavan sees our doubts, he said, look at it carefully, and then you'll see that it's just a rope. Because we trust Bhagavan's words, we go a little closer and look a little closer. When we look at it closely enough, we see, oh, it's just a rope. What seemed to be a snake is actually just a rope. Likewise, what now seems to be ego is actually just pure awareness. So if we look at the ego carefully enough, we'll see just pure awareness. Just as if we look at the snake carefully enough, we see just a rope. So when people who ask, Bhagavan, is it ego or the real self? But we have to investigate. Bhagavan said it's ego. Why? Because it's like if we ask, oh, Bhagavan, what do you want me to look at? Do you want me to look at the snake or the rope? Bhagavan knows that we are convinced it's a snake. So he said, look at the snake. Don't worry about the rope. Just look at the snake. We look at the snake and we see it's a rope. So Bhagavan's teachings are so beautifully simple and refined, and if you study the old texts and the commentaries on them, you'll find so many different types of explanation. Why are there so many different explanations of Advaita? Because not everyone is ready to understand, but not everyone is willing to understand the deepest truth. Like if you tell most people, all this appears only because you've risen as ego. When you don't rise as ego, none of this exists. No, this world, even when I fall asleep, this world still exists because everyone else sees it. So you can't say the world does. People are just not willing to accept that all this is actually just a dream, and it seems to exist only when we see it. When we fall asleep, according to Bhagavan, there is no world. There's no body, no world, nothing. These things seem to exist only in a waking state. And a similar set of things also seem to exist in dream. Just like we know, but while we're dreaming, the dream body and dream world all seem to be real. But when we wake up from a dream, we know, oh, it was all only my own figment of my own imagination. It was my own mental creation. We know that once we wake up. Bhagavan says in exactly the same way, this whole world is just a mental projection. So by the way Bhagavan explained it was the simplest possible way of explaining how, though there is only one, why does all this multiplicity appear? Because we rise as ego. Why does ego appear? Then Bhagavan says, that's an invalid question. See, before asking why ego appears, first see what ego is, whether there's any such thing as ego at all. If you look at ego keenly enough, you'll see there's no such thing. Therefore, there's nothing to explain. The one thing that can never be explained is how ego came into existence. Because if we investigate it, there's no such thing. And if so long as it seems to exist, it's the cause of everything else. No object could appear if there weren't a subject to see it. So all phenomena exist only in the view of ourself as ego. This is another thing that in the old commentaries and texts, it's often not very clear. People often say, oh, it's pure awareness that is seeing all this world. But there's a term used in old texts, sākṣi, the witness. Bhagavan has, and it's for a good reason they use that term, because what ego, the sākṣi is actually, according to Bhagavan, the sākṣi is just ego. That which is aware of all these phenomena is only ego. Why is the term sākṣi used? Because as ego, we are identifying ourselves with these 5 sheaves. So he said, no, you're not any of these things. You're not the body, you're not the prana, the life, you're not the mind, the intellect, or the will. You're that which is aware of all these things. You're the witness of all these things. That is to draw our attention back to ourselves as the mere witness, as the mere sākṣi, the mere perceiver of all these things. But if we look at this sākṣi, the perceiver, the one who sees all this, if we look at it keenly enough, then we will see what actually exists is just pure awareness. Just as if we look at the snake carefully enough, we see only a rope. There's no snake there at all. So there is no ego, there is no perceiver. But so long as we are looking outwards, we seem to exist as the ego or the sākṣi. So it's the reason this term sākṣi is used so much is to draw our attention back to the seer. But who is it who sees all this? To whom does all this appear? As Bhagavan often put the question to us. He said, investigate, to whom is all this? It's to draw our attention back to ourselves as the perceiver. But the perceiver is only ego. That's not what we actually are. But when we look at ego carefully enough, we see that we are just pure, well, what we actually are is just pure awareness. In some old texts, our real nature is also described as sākṣi, as a witness. He's said as sarva sākṣi, the witness of all. Bhagavan said, it's actually, if you're using sākṣi in the sense of perceiver, it's inappropriate to call our real nature as sākṣi, because our real nature is just pure awareness, which is never aware of anything other than itself. When our real nature is referred to as sākṣi, it's their sākṣi is being used in a slightly different sense, Bhagavan said. It's not in the sense of seer, or of that which is seeing everything, but that in the presence of which everything happens. If a witness to a crime has to be present there in order to witness it. So whoever is present is a witness. But so in that sense, sākṣi is there used in the sense of those who are present. But if you're present on the scene of a crime and you're not paying attention, you can't actually, you can't give testimony in court because you didn't see what happened. Yes, I was there, but I wasn't looking. So I don't know what happened. A car suddenly appeared and crashed into another car. So who was responsible? I have no idea because I wasn't paying attention. So, so in the older text, the term sākṣi, though it's used for a good purpose, it's then applied to the pure awareness and confusion is created. So Bhagavan, to clarify that, he said, sākṣi is our real nature, pure awareness, is sākṣi only in the sense of presence. That which is a witness to everything, that which perceives everything, is only ego. So in so many ways, Bhagavan has refined and clarified the teachings of Advaita. And he's explained it all in a much simpler way. That is, by explaining it more simply, it's clearer, it's easier for us to understand. And also he's made clear, that is the theory, all the theory Bhagavan taught us points to the practice. That we cannot separate the theory and the practice, because the theory is the basis on which the practice is done. So if we understand the theory of Bhagavan's teaching, then the practice is very clear. All we have to do is to withdraw our attention from all phenomena and focus it on ourselves, the perceiver of all phenomena, the witness, the sākṣi. But there's so many confusions, people, because, I mean, it's natural. Anything that is explained to the human mind is always interpreting things. And we interpret things according to what we already understand and believe and everything. So when very subtle things are taught to us, if our minds are gross, we will give a gross interpretation to the subtle teachings. So the teachings of Advaita are extremely subtle, but they're interpreted in a gross way. For example, there are some Advaitins who say, yes, your self is the sākṣi. Atman is the sākṣi. Atman is, again, Atman is a word but simply means oneself. In some contexts, it refers to our real nature. In some contexts, it can refer to ego. For instance, in the term Atma-samarpanam, self-surrender, what is the self we are to surrender? It's not our real nature, it's only ego. So, but but when it is said Atman is the sākṣi, what is actually the sākṣi is only ego, but people take it to be the real self, but what our real nature is the sākṣi. So something else. Oh yeah. So some Advaitin, so some people who have a sort of half understanding of Advaita, they think, self is the sākṣi. So in order to abide as self or to be as self, you just have to be a witness to everything. So whatever happens, you just witness all things. Bhagavan says, no, so long as you allow your attention to go outwards, you are not you are not experiencing yourself as you really are. You're aware, you're mistaking yourself to be a form. Only when we mistake ourselves to be the form of this body, in other words, only when we rise as ego, are we aware of other things. So being a sākṣi, being that is trying to witness all things, is just feeding and nourishing ego. Why it is taught, but oneself is the sākṣi, what we actually are is the sākṣi, is to draw our attention away from everything perceived back to the perceiver. That which perceives is the sākṣi. So when our attention is drawn back to ourself, the perceiver, that is to ego, ego is thereby loses its hold on other things. It subsides and it disappears. So in so many ways, Bhagavan, by presenting his teachings, by presenting Advaita in an extremely simple, direct and practical way, Bhagavan has simplified, clarified, and clarified so many things. So if we want to understand Advaita correctly, we don't need to read all the Upanishads or Brahma Sutras or Bhagavad Gita or commentaries on them. We don't need to study any of that. All we need to do is to read a few small texts like Nāṉ Ār, Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, Upadēśa Taṉippākkaļ, and some of the verses in Aruṇācala Pañcaratnam and a few other things. But in Bhagavan's original writings, Advaita is presented in the simplest possible way. So Bhagavan has the contribution made by Bhagavan in simplifying in giving simple explanations and representing Advaita in an extremely simple and clear manner. The contribution made by Bhagavan is something priceless. And why all this is, it's not just to to clarify the philosophy of Advaita. What's the aim of Advaita is to turn our attention back towards ourselves so that we know ourselves. So Bhagavan's teachings, all of Bhagavan's teachings are constantly drawing our attention back to ourselves. That's why when people used to ask Bhagavan questions, to whom is this question? He would constantly be, in so many ways, he would constantly be turning people's attention back to themselves. Some people weren't satisfied. They went on asking their question. Then Bhagavan will come down to their level and give appropriate answers according to their level. But his core teachings is extremely simple. And because the simpler something is, the clearer it is. So Bhagavan has made it as simple as can possibly be. So it's as clear as can possibly be. So I hope that answered that question adequately. Jyoti, you had your hand raised. Are you no longer here?
Hi, Michael. I am here.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, I think you've already answered my question through your previous answers.
Okay.
So shall I ask the question just to confirm whether
yes,
what I
yes,
thought was the answer?
Certainly.
Okay, I'll just read out the question. It's in the chat. I'll read it out. Okay, so I've come across a couple of stories where Bhagavan has discouraged his devotees from studying Vedanta philosophy Has he discouraged everyone without exception? Or can one study it if one has deep inclination towards it, keeping in mind that the core essence of it is Ramana's teachings? Actually, there's a college which offers 3 years course for on Vedanta. I'm too tempted to go there, but I'm confused. Yeah.
Right. I wouldn't. I'm not aware of Bhagavan actually discouraging people from studying Vedanta. Bhagavan, at the request of various people, Bhagavan translated old texts. When people came and asked questions based upon old texts, he would answer them and everything. What he discouraged, I mean, Bhagavan's view on this is most clearly expressed by him in the 16th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār. That is, he says all the texts, that implies the text of Advaita, since in every text of Advaita, it is said that for attaining mukti, it is necessary to curb the mind or to make the mind cease. After knowing that mano nigraha, that means restraint or destruction of the mind, alone is the ultimate intention of such texts, there's no benefit to be gained in studying them without limit. So what Bhagavan discouraged is endless studying. There are some people who just love to, who love philosophy and they love explanations, and they got more and more questions, and they like all the elaborate answers and everything. That's just all a distraction. The whole purpose of Advaita, what is the essence of Advaita? One only without a second. And what is that one only? Tattvamasi, you are that. So when we are that, why do we have to go on studying texts? If we are really interested in knowing what we are, it's unnecessary. We need to have a clear understanding of the basic principles of Advaita, as Bhagavan has given us very clearly in Nāṉ Ār, Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, and just a few texts like that. Once we've grasped the basic principles, there's no point in studying more and more and more books, because what we're going to gain by studying more and more, either we're going to find the same thing said again and again, or we're going to find different types of explanations and we're going to confuse ourselves. So best to stick to Bhagavan's core teachings, understand them, and then put them into practice. It's only by putting it into practice, as Bhagavan says, he goes on to say in that paragraph, for making the mind cease, it is necessary to investigate oneself to see what one actually is. But instead of doing so, how can one see oneself investigating in text? I'm slightly paraphrasing because it's put in a very terse way by Bhagavan. And also it's very difficult. Certain Tamil sentence formations are difficult to translate into English. So there are a few words I'm adding here just for clarification. So and then he goes on to say, it's necessary for one to know oneself by one's own eye of jnana. That means one's own awareness, one's own eye of awareness. And then he says, does Raman, I mean, the person called Raman, need a mirror to know himself as Raman? Oneself is outside the, oneself is within the Panchakoshas, the 5 sheaths, whereas texts are outside them. Therefore, investigating in text to know oneself, whom it is necessary to investigate by setting aside all the 5 sheaths, is useless. And then he goes on to say, investigating oneself who is by investigating oneself who is in bondage, knowing one's yathartha sarupa, one's own actual nature, alone is liberation. The name Atma-vichara refers only to the practice of always keeping the mind in or on oneself, whereas dhyana, meditation, is imagining oneself to be Satchidananda. The term he uses the term that I've translated as imagining there, he says, Dhyanamo tanne Satchidananda Brahmamaha Bhavipadu. Bhavipadu means imagining, that's considering oneself to be, thinking oneself to be. So Bhagavan often said, we cannot know Brahman by just thinking I am Brahman. Since Brahman is I, we need to investigate I. When we know what I is, then we know what Brahman is. And then he says, if a concluding sentence of this paragraph, at one time it will become necessary to forget all one has learned. However much we study texts and learn so much philosophy, and we may become expert in the Brahma Sutras and the Bhagavad Gita and all the commentaries on them, we may be able to, we may become a renowned expert in all these things. One day this body is going to die and we're going to, all this knowledge
We've lost you, Michael, you're frozen.
So however much we study all these texts, however much learning we acquire, as Bhagavan says, whatever a day will, how to say, at one time it will become necessary to forget all that one has learned. So we may acquire vast learning in this life, but when this body dies, we forget everything that we've learned. So learning about anything other than ourselves is ultimately useless. What we need to learn is, who am I? What am I? To know what am I, we need to turn our attention within. So Bhagavan, what Bhagavan opposed was not studying Vedanta or Advaita philosophy, endlessly studying these things. And in order to make it very simple for us, Bhagavan has condensed the whole of Advaita into very, very simple principles, but he is taught very clearly in Nāṉ Ār, Uḷḷadu Nāṛpadu, and other. If you have studied Bhagavan's and understood Bhagavan's original writings, no other texts are necessary, because whatever is useful in other texts is there more clearly and simply in Bhagavan's own writings. But that doesn't, I mean, naturally, because of our interest in this subject, we do occasionally refer to verses of Bhagavad Gita, or we see someone has quoted an Upanishad or some commentary, or nowadays there are so many videos on YouTube in which people explain these things. There's no harm in listening to these things. I mean, it's better to be thinking about these things than thinking about worldly matters. But we should be very careful not to allow ourselves to be confused. And in order to avoid confusion, we need to very clearly understand Bhagavan's core teachings. If we've understood Bhagavan's core teaching, then when we listen to other people explaining Advaita, we'll see some of the things they say are correct. Some of the things we'll see, no, Bhagavan has said that in a better way, clearer way. And what they're saying, their explanation, often there are problems with the explanations given by others, because nobody has understood this subject as clearly and as deeply as Bhagavan. So Bhagavan has what Bhagavan has presented in his own way, is in his own original text, is the clearest and simplest possible explanation of all these things. So
yes, Michael.
It's up to you. I mean, ultimately, if it's your destiny to go to college and 3 years study Vedanta, you cannot avoid that. If it's not your destiny, it's not going to happen. But so Bhagavan said we don't have to worry about the outward course of our life, because it's already charted out according to Prarabdha. So nothing can happen that is not according to Prarabdha. But whatever else it may be your Prarabdha to study, I would strongly suggest you you hold on to Bhagavan's teaching, hold on to the core principles of Bhagavan's teaching, understand Bhagavan's teachings clearly and thoroughly. In order to do that, you not only need to study his text, you also need to put it into practice, because the more we practice what Bhagavan taught us, the more his words become clear to us. That is, to the extent to which we turn our attention within, to that extent, all Bhagavan's words will become clear to us. So the practice is that if you truly want to understand Bhagavan's teaching, putting what he said into practice is most important. Because, as he said, the real teaching is not the teaching in words, but the teaching in silence. The words are all pointing towards that silence. Where are the words pointing? Back towards ourselves, because we ourselves are that silence. So to the extent to which we attend to ourselves, to that extent, then we are listening to Bhagavan's silent teachings. Why is it said that our real nature, that it's through silence that our real nature is revealed? Firstly, our real nature is silence, in the sense it is not any thought or words or anything. It is just pure being. But it's also the original light. What is the light that illumines the mind? That is the light of pure awareness. When we turn our mind inwards to face that light, we are thereby purifying the mind, clarifying the mind. So the more we put this into practice, the clearer Bhagavan's words will become to us. And when we understand Bhagavan's words clearly, there'll be less and less inclination to look for anything anywhere else. And where are his words pointing? Constantly back to ourselves. So it's good to repeatedly study Bhagavan's teachings alongside our practice, because when we practice, we gain more clarity from within. Then when we read his teaching, we see more meaning in them. And his teachings are constantly encouraging us to turn back within. So the greatest aid to our practice is Bhagavan's teachings. So Bhagavan's teachings should always be, we should always be taking them as our support and our encouragement, and allowing ourselves to be encouraged by them to turn back within. That is what is most important. As far as whether if it's your destiny to study Vedanta in a college for 3 years, that will happen. If it's not your destiny, it will not happen. So you need not concern yourself about that. What is in our hands is we are free at every moment. We have a choice whether to attend to other things or to attend to ourselves. The more we attend to ourselves, the more clarity we'll be getting from within. And then when we do read Bhagavan's teachings, we'll be getting more and more from them. So
Michael.
What we gain from Bhagavan's teachings, we gain clarity from Bhagavan's teachings to the extent to which we put them into practice. Does that adequately answer your question?
Yes, Michael. Thank you.
Right. Shalini, you have your hand raised.
Yes, let me put it down. Yeah, I was going to ask something else, but I just wanted to clarify something, which hopefully is helpful. When we talk about ego, and when you're talking about that awareness with objects and the pure awareness, which obviously does not witness anything or see anything.
Yes.
So one way of talking about these two, they're not two kinds of consciousness. One is the sort of muddled, confused consciousness. The other is the pure one.
Yeah.
So which itself is a kind of grasping that sort of sustains it. Then that kind of awareness, the muddled one, is, for want of a better word, that awareness, one could simply say that's the cognitive awareness. That's the one which arises moment to moment.
Yes.
You know, the perceiving awareness, the cognitive awareness, which is there in waking and in dream as well. We're still the body and the world together. So, and one of the things which I've found, rightly or wrongly, is that in the case of both Bhagavan, but also of, other people have sort of mentioned it, I believe, that if you, this thing of turning within, of self-attention, of course, it's much more easily said than done. I think everybody has this problem of, well, this who am I, the self-attention, well, what does it mean? How do I do it? I mean, this is the constant problem, isn't it?
Yes.
So one thing which sort of, and Śrī Ramana himself, had that sort of death experience where I'm not sure if one could say that he pretended, but he sort of went into this kind of, I don't know how to put it, into this sort of state or whatever. I mean, as if he was dead. It was as if he was dead, that sort of thing. And it's sometimes said that one of the things which is helpful is that if one just, well, not really think back, but sort of think back or reflect back to what it was like, before I was born, or when I'm dead, because then obviously there is no awareness. Of objects, or when I'm in deep sleep, and when one is just waking up. I find very often, it's in those moments. Sometimes you have a dream, you wake up, and you've just slipped from this reality of the dream into this reality here, and then you start feeling, from one reality to another, one dream to another dream. You feel that. But also, there's a little bit more intimacy with that deep sleep state, slightly, and it's a good time to, if one can just again become aware of that, to simply reflect back on that deep sleep, that just turn one back in, and even during the day at times, to just think back, because that sort of draws the senses and everything in a bit. And I believe that is the beginnings of a kind of self-attention or alertness. Would this be right?
That is, our experience in sleep is a priceless clue in this path. So long as that is what we are aware of in sleep is only ourself. So long as to the extent that we are aware of anything that we are not aware of in sleep, our attention is not on ourself. In other words, we are trying to draw our attention back to ourself so keenly that we experience what we experienced in sleep. However, there's one important thing to understand about this. According to Bhagavan and Advaita, in all Advaitic teaching, it is insisted, but in sleep is a state of awareness. And if we think about it carefully, we can understand why this is the case, because we are aware not only of two states, we're very clearly aware there are two states in which we're aware of phenomena, and there's one state in which we're not aware of phenomena. How can we be aware of having been in a state in which we were not aware of phenomena if we had not been aware of being in that state? So that we do have it's not a memory, but it's not, because memory is always of other things, but but using memory in a very loose sense, because there's no other adequate word for it. Our memory of sleep, we do have a memory of what we experienced in sleep. However, our memory of what we experienced in sleep is clouded. Why is it clouded? Because what we experienced in sleep is the pure awareness that we actually are. Even now we are that pure awareness, but that pure awareness in our experience now is clouded, because instead of being aware of ourselves just as I am, we're aware of ourselves as I am this person, and consequently I'm aware of all these other things. So the same ignorance, if you want to use the term, but clouds our present awareness of ourselves as we actually are, is also clouding our awareness of ourselves as we actually are, recollection of the awareness of ourselves in sleep. So what we know about sleep, what we know about ourselves, we know I am. But though we know that I am, we don't know what I am. That is, we're aware of I am, but we're aware of ourselves as something other than what we actually are. Instead of being aware of just I am, we're aware of I am this person. So this same ego that is clouding our present awareness of ourselves, as obscuring our awareness of ourselves as we actually are, is also obscuring the awareness that we experience in sleep, which was also an awareness of what we actually are. So, but what we do recollect of sleep is a precious clue. And when we are trying to turn our attention within, we are trying to experience what we experienced in sleep, but with clarity, with full attention. It was with clarity and full clarity in sleep, but mind wasn't there, ego wasn't there. Now as ego, we are trying to achieve that clarity by focusing our attention on ourselves. So thinking deeply about sleep and our experience in sleep is a very valuable clue.
Yeah,
and as you say, what we experience in sleep is also what we experience before the birth of a body and after the death of a body. But because our present life is just a dream. All dreams go on in a background of sleep.
Yeah, because it's been pointed out by people, and it just depends on what is helpful. I think individually, whether just sort of trying to recollect that sleep, whatever that experience was in sleep, or prior to birth, or at death, whichever I don't know, is helpful for people.
Another thing that is helpful to think more. As I said, though we remember sleep, we recollect sleep. It is not actually a memory like other memories. Other memories, we perceive, all experience is perception of phenomena. And a memory, we are able to bring back that perception, as it were. So yesterday, I ate a certain meal. I can now remember it. I'm able to bring back into my mind the taste of that food, whose company I was in, what we were talking about. I can, to the extent I remember things, I bring them back into my mind. So a memory is like a sort of reproduction of a perception. That's a normal memory. Our memory of sleep is fundamentally different from this. That is, what we are always aware of, the one thing that we are always aware of is I am. And whereas all other experiences are changing, they come and they go, but one constant experience is this fundamental experience I am. So because we are now aware of ourselves as I am, when we think about sleep, we understand, yes, I was also aware of myself as I am in sleep. So it's that continuity of that base awareness, that fundamental awareness I am, that is what we call a memory of sleep, is just the recognition of that continuity of this base awareness. Because whether pictures appear on the screen or disappear, the screen is always there as a background. Likewise, whether waking and dream appear or disappear, waking dream with all their phenomena and everything, whether they appear or they disappear, that background awareness of I am is the constant. So when we are contemplating sleep, we don't have to go back to sleep. We contemplate it here and now, because what we experienced in sleep is here and now. It's what we are now referring to as I, in its most fundamental condition. I, as that base awareness, the pure awareness I am.
Yeah, maybe, I'm not sure if it's the right word, because it's not thinking in that sense, it's not remembering.
Yes.
Maybe one way to put it, I'm not sure if it's the right way, would be as a kind of self-intimacy, because, and that's why one begins to relax also, isn't it? Yeah.
What is the nearest and dearest to us? What is the thing with which we are always most intimate? It's ourself. That is that fundamental awareness I am. Everything else comes and goes. Even this ego comes and goes. But the essence of ego, the light that illumines ego, which is this fundamental awareness I am, that alone is constant. So that is what we need to be clinging to. So sleep serves as a clue to that, but we don't have to refer back to sleep which was in the past. Find that sleep here and now. Bring that sleep into the waking state, because it's already present there as I am.
And maybe that's why in the case of Bhagavan, but also sometimes even some meditation teachers, they say that, it's not something which should be forced or can be, or it's not like some sort of a discipline, because it is that kind of intimacy, that relaxation, and you want to be doing that. That's why it's called love or bliss or the beloved, whatever it is.
That is why Bhagavan said, Bhakti is the mother of jnana. Without love, we cannot even begin to investigate ourselves without love. This path of self-investigation is the ultimate path of bhakti. It's the culmination of the path of bhakti. Because in bhakti, we are devoted to what? To God. We have a certain idea of God. I mean, there are so many different ideas people have about God, but whatever, people are devoted to a certain idea. But what is the reality of that idea? God cannot be, God is the infinite whole. I think all theologians, all religions will agree. Yes, God is infinite. If God is infinite, nothing can be other than him. So what we actually are must be God. What we essentially are, our true being, what we are at the most fundamental level, that is God. So where can we find God? God is that which is shining in us as I. So attending to I, there's one verse in which Bhagavan said Bhagavan just wrote it as a stray verse, and it's included in a work called Upadēśa Taṉippākkaḻ, which is not. Most of the verses are scattered in different books, but they have all been collected into this collection of Bhagavan's miscellaneous verses. One of them, Bhagavan says, Atmanusantanam aktu paramisa bhakti. That is, because God shines us. I can't remember exactly what the verse is, but what it is, Atmanusantanam means self-attentiveness. Self-attentiveness, that is the supreme devotion to God, is what Bhagavan is saying there. Because God always exists as oneself, because God is that which is shining in our heart as I, but the purest devotion to God is clinging to I. But as you say, we cannot cling to I without that love, because in order to cling to I, we need to be willing to let go of other things. We're reluctant to let go of other things because of our desires and attachments. So our love for just being as I am has to be greater than our liking for all other things. So love is the absolute, without love, without bhakti, this part, I mean, there is no self-investigation without bhakti.
Yeah, it's the same thing, isn't it? Because when you sort of begin to even if you just try to sort of recollect sleep or whatever, it is the beginning of love. I mean, it is that kind of self.
Definitely.
About whether Bhagavan had talked about collective karma, but that can wait. I think somebody else wants to, has an urgent question, and maybe it's better to continue in this line because it's
okay.
We're approaching the end.
Yeah, exactly.
Somebody else could ask the question.
Yeah,
quickly. It's a quick one, yeah.
Kartik, you are the next. Your hand is the next one.
Somebody popped up saying that he wanted to. Yeah.
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes, I can hear you.
Okay. Hi, Michael. I want to talk about ask a question regarding characteristics of ego. For example, let's say I'm thinking that I want to follow the path of Bhagavan, and I really like the teaching. I want to really do the self-enquiry. And isn't it that thought also a work of an ego? Can I trust that? And how, in that case, that thought is ego is a good thing, right? And it's actually willing to, give the distraction to itself by giving me that thought. So in that way, the ego is very compassionate. And but like in a way, people are portraying ego is a bad thing. It is always keeps us away from the self. So how can I reconcile these good and bad characteristics of ego?
That is, though we say the ego, when we say the ego, it sounds as if it's something other than ourself. Ego is what we seem to be, so long as we're aware of anything other than ourself. So ego means I, it means ourself. So it's not an object. The nature of ego, as Bhagavan says, it comes into existence grasping form. It stands grasping form, and grasping and feeding on form it nourishes. So grasping is the very nature of ego. Why does ego grasp forms? Because we associate, because we have desire for certain experiences, when we get that experience, our desire is satisfied, so temporarily we feel some happiness. That happiness is not coming from that experience. Supposing you like to eat chocolate, for example, because you have that liking for chocolate, sometimes the thought comes to you, oh, I want chocolate. So long as you're dwelling on that desire for chocolate, there's an agitation in your mind. When you get that piece of chocolate and put it in your mouth, you're satisfied. So you experience some pleasure. But is that pleasure there in the chocolate? No. Bhagavan said there's no happiness in any of the external things. Happiness lies only from within. Because when that desire for chocolate is satisfied, the agitation of your mind caused by that desire subsides. Because of the subsidence of that, the mind is calm, the happiness that is within you comes forth. So as ego, we are constantly grasping things, because what is driving us to grasp things is that search for happiness. Happiness that desire for happiness is what is driving all our actions. But over the course of many lives, we find that trying to fulfill our material desires is unsatisfactory, because whatever material things we get a fleeting pleasure from them, but it's never satisfactory. We always want more, we want more, we want more. So satisfaction we cannot find in external experiences. So slowly a maturity comes to the mind, and we come to understand that desire is the cause of unhappiness. By fulfilling our desires, we're only feeding the desires. We're not getting rid of the desires. In order to be truly happy, we need to be free of desire. Then we come to the path that is when the surrender begins. We rather than seeking to fulfill our desires, we seek to give up our desires. We seek to be free of desires. So we come to the path of devotion. We think, God, not my will, your will. Whatever you want for me is what is good for me. So slowly, all this is ego. It's ego, but it was previously seeking happiness outside. Now it is seeking happiness in trying to give up its desires and surrender its desires to God. By trying to curb its desires, its likes and dislikes, and trying to accept everything as God's will, ego is slowly purified. That means the strength of its desires and attachment they're reduced in strength. As they get reduced in strength, we begin to recognize that we cannot get rid of desires and attachment. We can reduce their strength, but we cannot get rid of them entirely, so long as we rise as ego. Because ego is the root of desires. Ego is like the root of a bush. If you cut all the leaves and branches off, they sprout again. So long as there is an ego, desire and attachment are inevitable. You may be able to reduce the strength of them. You may be able to surrender your desires and attachments. To a certain extent, you can surrender them to God. But you cannot get rid of them entirely without getting rid of the root. That root is yourself as ego. So ego eventually comes to understand, but it's only by surrendering itself that it can achieve the happiness, but we can achieve the happiness that we are all seeking. So the whole of the spiritual path is ego. It's ego seek. A spiritual person is, in a sense, no different to any other. An ego on the spiritual path is essentially no different to an ego on a worldly path, because we're all seeking happiness. Seeking happiness is our very nature. We cannot avoid seeking happiness, because what we actually are is infinite happiness. When we rise as ego, we are limiting ourselves. As a limited, finite being, we cannot experience unlimited happiness. So we are all seeking, ultimately, even the the worst criminals and the worst people in the world, they're all seeking the same that we're seeking. They're seeking that infinite happiness. They just happen to be looking for it in the wrong way. They think they can get happiness by exploiting others, or by robbing others, or by taking advantage of others. But what they're seeking is the same that we are seeking. It's the same happiness. We're all seeking the same happiness. It's a matter of, to the extent the mind is purified, we understand the happiness we are seeking isn't to be achieved from external things. It's to be found only within. So it is ego from the beginning to the end, but it's ego that eventually comes to a point where it's willing to surrender itself. Only when ego is willing to surrender itself will it be willing to turn within 180 degrees and thereby dissolve back into its source.
Okay, well, I think that's it. Thank you, Michael. Thank you again. That was
all thanks to Bhagavan.
Michael, hi Michael, could I share something about Nama that
Yes.
I learned from Sri Ravi Shankar?
Yes, certainly.
Yeah, he said there's this word called mana, right, in Sanskrit.
Yes.
Mana is when the mind goes outwards.
Yes.
And the reverse of it, namaha,
Yes.
means when the mind goes inwards.
That's also a very nice explanation.
Yeah. Is the same as what Swami Sarvapriyananda said, right?
It is not exactly the same, but they're all pointing in the same direction. What Swami Sarvapriyananda said is, if I understood correctly, he said it means na ma, not me.
Michael has come up, I've heard of it before. I don't know how authentic that sense it is, but it's nice.
Yeah, it's like Bhagavan explained Māyā as Yama, that which is not. Whether that is actually the origin of the word, I don't know, but it's a very meaningful explanation of the word. So I think we can take Nama in this, but Nama is a very meaningful explanation of Namaha.
Yeah. Michael, won't you say that Bhagavan's teaching about Shumma Ira, be still, is a wonderful teaching? Because for me, I find that to be extremely useful and wonderful. Would you say that?
Yes,
Shumma
definitely.
Ira, be still, be silent, and silence in the sense of keeping the mind silent.
Yes. But true silence of mind is the state of no mind at all. So long as we rise as ego, that is the beginning of all activity. So the state of Summa Irupadu, Bhagavan says in the 6th paragraph of Nāṉ Ār, that what is Summa Irupadu, what is just being, is making the mind dissolve in oneself, in our real nature.
Yes.
In the waking state.
Yes. Waking or dream state, it's in either.
Yes.
Oh, hi, Michael. I'm from Coimbatore in India. I've been living in the UK for the past 18 years. And I tend to go to Deepam every year to go to Ramana's ashram, Sheshadri Swamigal, and the Yogi Ram Surat Kumar. So it's more like I've just been, what do you call it, a regular goer for Deepam up there. But to me, the person who really drawn me to spirituality was Ramakrishna. And the methods of teachings are different. And now when I come into my day-to-day life, I think when I've interacted with many people, I don't think there is much different in people asking the questions. So it's all about, my question is all about the sincerity in practice. So here I tend to have a specific time to practice every day on the japa, and that's my path. I have just fixated onto it. But there are times, I do lose hope and, not able to take it to the next level or something like that, the frustration comes. How do you handle it, if you know what I mean? It's like, even though when I listen to surrender, when I listen to many good things, it all feels good right now. But there are times I do feel low where, what I've done, whether it's really taking me to the next level, those kind of question comes. How to tackle that, please?
We need to be clear what our goal is. What is our goal? Japa, if it can be a means of purifying the mind, but we can, by other practices, we can purify the mind up to a certain point, but eventually the perfectly pure mind is when mind is completely surrendered to God. So our ultimate aim is that state of complete surrender, where we lose ourselves in God, where God alone remains. That is what all great sages, Ramakrishna, essentially Ramakrishna's teachings are the same as Bhagavan's. Teachings may be expressed in different terms suitable to different people. But Ramakrishna, for example, one place in his gospel, he says very clearly, ultimately one comes to know God by trying to find out what this I is. So though he seemed to teach many other things, what he said, ultimately, it's only by trying to find out what this I is. That's what Bhagavan's teachings are all about. So Bhagavan gave a nice clue about japa. When we repeat a mantra or a name of God or whatever, we should try to fix our attention on the source from which that mantra is coming. That is on ourself. Why? Because God is that which is always shining in our heart as I. So the japa is supposed to lead us to God. So it should be drawing our attention back to ourselves, to the one who is doing the japa. So in this way, we can, if we want to take it to the next level, the japa has to draw our attention back to ourselves. Because to the extent our attention is drawn back to ourselves, to that extent will ego subside and dissolve back into its source.
Okay, I got the clarity. It's the theoretical understanding is there. Yes. Practice is a bit challenging, and I've been
practice is challenging for all of us, because the nature of the mind is to be always going out to grasp other things. That is, as Bhagavan says, grasping form, urupatri, your Tamilians, I can say in Tamil, urupatri undam, urupatri nikkum, urupatri undu mika ongum. So that is the nature of mind or ego. It's always grasping form, things outside itself. But if it tries to turn it back within to grasp itself, it begins to dissolve. Because when we turn our attention within to face ourselves, what we are actually facing is the reality that lies behind the mind or ego. That is God or Brahman or whatever we call it. That is the pure awareness that we actually are. So definitely practice will always be a struggle. It has to be a struggle, because we are trying to overcome the outward going nature of the mind. The Vishaya Vasanas, that means the inclination to go outwards towards Vishayas. When we are trying to turn within, we are trying to leave all the Vishayas and go back within. So until the mind is perfectly purified, sadhana is a struggle. When the mind is perfectly purified, mind dissolves back into its source, and then there's no struggle at all.
Yeah, like this year I couldn't go just because of this coronavirus thing.
Yes.
But, when I go there, when I do my circumambulation as per Bhagavan's ideas and everything, I think I'm still in the early stages of practices. Like everybody else, it's more like when you go through some practices, when life hits you with some kind of tough situations, that's where you kind of lose hope and those kind of things. So getting that theory and the practice and the challenges arising is what I wanted to ask. But thanks for clarification, Michael. I think it's more like I just wanted to keep on with my practices and see
That's all. We just
where I'm going from here. But I have full faith in Ramakrishna's teachings, Bhagavan's teachings, and everybody.
Yeah.
All are same. So it's nothing different.
Bhagavan often said, perseverance is the only true sign of progress. So if you are persevering in your practice, you are progressing.
Thank you. Thank you. I'm very happy to speak to you. This is my first time speaking to you.
Okay.
I've listened to your YouTube videos and thank you. Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for your time.
Thank you. Smita, you, yes.
Yes,
Please.
she has connectivity issues, so I have to ask the question on her behalf.
Yes, certainly.
Okay. Her question is, what kind of relationship did Bhagavan have with Lord Shiva?
Bhagavan is Lord Shiva. That is the original form of Lord Shiva, the Adi Linga Swarupa, is Aruṇācala. Lord Shiva appeared between Brahma and Vishnu in the form of a column of fire. That column of fire, after the egos of Brahma and Vishnu were subdued and they worshipped him, that column of fire, they prayed to him. In this form of this bright Jyoti Stambha, the column of fire, the world cannot stand you. So you should take a lackluster form. So that column of fire came, subsided down into the form of this hill. So this hill, Aruṇācala, is the Adi Linga Swarupa. It's the original Linga form of Shiva. So this hill is Shiva himself. This hill is always teaching us through silence. But because our minds are going outwards, we're not understanding that silent teaching. So that same hill appeared in human form as Bhagavan. So Bhagavan is Sakshat Shiva Swarupa. So Bhagavan is Shiva. But because in our view, he seemed to be separate, his relationship with Aruṇācala Shiva was one of pure love. And you can see that pure love expressed beautifully in Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam. But actually that Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam is a love prayer to him, a love song to himself, because he himself is Shiva. So Shiva has taught us how to pray to him through Aruṇācala Stuti Panchakam, particularly Akṣaramaṇamālai.
Well, thanks so much. Really appreciate all that you're doing for us. Thank you.
Okay, well, it's all Bhagavan's doing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mike.
If I am doing, then there's trouble. Nama means no me, so that is our aim.
That's how you are able to sit for 4 hours, Michael. At this age.
Oh, I'm a chatterbox. It's no difficulty for me.
You are so humble, Michael. You are the man with the greatest humility I know.
Not at all. Not at all.
Yeah.
The greatest humility.
It's all the posture. So long as there is ego, there is no humility. Ego and humility are poles apart.
No.
Only when there's no me, nama, then there's true humility.
There's only Namo Ramana.
Namo Ramana. Namo Ramanaya. Mano Maranaya.